What's up, everyone? Welcome to another segment of Crypto World Radio. My name is King Wabi, and today we are here for an earlier episode of Crypto World Radio presented to you by Because Bitcoin live here on Twitter Spaces. If you guys enjoy content like this on the more crypto specific side and you're new here to our channel here on Twitter, feel free to give us a follow here at Because Bitcoin. Turn on bell notifications so that you can be made aware of when these spaces are held. They're usually held at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. However, when we do have special guests on today, like Dr. Jeff, they might be a little bit earlier in the day or a bit later. So I encourage you all the time, anytime I host these spaces, to turn on bell notifications. I think that's pretty important, especially when you want more signal, not so much noise, particularly here in the forest known as crypto Twitter. And to remind you guys, we also have Market Talk at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time with our boy Carter. That goes over more macroeconomic stuff and things pertaining to the U.S. equity markets and abroad. And as far as our YouTube channel, we have Market Check with our CEO Max, and also our analyst Snorlax and Premise. Usually after these Twitter Spaces, the replays are uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So if you're not able to stick around on these spaces, you'll be able to catch them up on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and leave any sort of feedback there, and we'll see what we can do. Good or bad, we encourage it. So without further ado, Dr. Jeff, I want to welcome you on the show. We met about a year ago, back when Big Brandon used to hold his big mega spaces. And sir, it's an honor to have you here on behalf of myself and Because Bitcoin. Thank you for taking the time out of your day and to come talk some shop with us, man. So, how are you doing today, man? How's it going?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, King Lobby, for having me up. Feel Pain, good to see you. I don't know if Carter's on the other handle or what's going on, but it's great to be up here with you guys. I'm honored to be here. I'm doing well personally. As you guys know, I spent all of last year being called Dr. Bear, it was a well-deserved moniker. But I think that's flipping now, and I'm pretty excited about that. I'm sure we'll get into that during today's discussion. So thanks for having me up. By the way, just so you guys know, I got a hard stop in about 50 minutes 50 minutes past the hour. So, because I got another interview coming up after this. So, just so you know.
No problem, Dr. Jeff. Usually these spaces typically finish around that time, so we'll be very respectful when it pertains to your time, sir. So I guess we'll get started, man. Just so we can have some background about who you are. You're usually on our spaces, and you've interacted with us for quite some time. But as for myself, I've only bumped into you here and there. So I guess my general question to you to start off this conversation is, I know you've been running your hedge fund for quite some time. How did you guys run into the digital asset space, and what intrigued you to add it to your portfolio for your clients? I'd really like to get into that.
Yeah, that's a good starting spot for this. So the way I got into Bitcoin and crypto in general, first of all, it was back in 2015 and 2016 when I first started learning about it. Why did I get into it? I mean, I'm a fund manager, and I'm constantly looking for the best risk-adjusted returns, right? And without a doubt, Bitcoin had offered those up. So if you look at things like Sharpe ratios and things, that's measuring returns versus kind of the underlying volatility. And Bitcoin basically blew all asset classes out of the water for many, many years. And it's still, actually I haven't checked recently, but it's still, at the top end of that range, I'm sure. That's what got me into it initially. And I'll just give you my quick little story so y'all know where I'm coming from, because I'm pretty fanatically into Bitcoin at this point. I used to be into Bitcoin, and then I got into trading crypto, and rode the 2016, 2017 bull market high. By the end of 2017, I was doing pretty well, obviously. But the huge mistake I made at that time is I sold all of my Bitcoin for the popular cryptos of the day. That was the big ICO craze days back then. I don't know if you guys were around then. But so I ended 2017 with basically no Bitcoin and tons of other cryptos, like a portfolio of like 50 or so of these little guys that were all going to, change the world. Then 2018 came, my first real crypto winter experience. Just got decimated, right? Like so the way by April of 2018, I was left with no Bitcoin. All of my cryptos were down about 90 to 95%, because at the time I was more of just a buy and hold type investor person. That was my mentality. And I got hit with just a massive tax bill for my 2017 profits. And so I'm like, well, that sucked. And what happened there? And so, anyways, fast forward to about 2019, I spent a ton of time focusing on what is the difference between Bitcoin and crypto, and ended up getting pretty hardcore orange pilled. I got a nice personality, so I'm not like a classic Bitcoin maxi, but I'm definitely like a Bitcoin fanatic. Love teaching people about it. Decided to focus all of my attention on just that, and talking about the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. That's how that all came around. Now I still am a macro investor. I still look across all asset classes. I look kind of like from the 30,000-foot view of where the world is going. That's what made me bearish for basically all of 2022. I like to look at things like, what is the net liquidity in the system looking like? What are central banks doing? Are they adding liquidity? Is liquidity contracting? How does the flow of asset movements move in relation to that? So what are treasuries doing? And bond yields across the board. What are currencies doing? How do different asset classes respond to all of those maneuvers? That's what I spend my time looking at and thinking about, and that's how I invest for my clients.
Perfect, man. Thank you for that explanation. So, on the client side, do they ever become skeptical when it pertains to Bitcoin? Because usually, for the average investor, particularly here in America, whenever they put their dollar in something, they like to see things like earnings, profit and losses. What liabilities does the company hold? What sort of debt do they have on their sheets? How is the prospect for Bitcoin presented in your professional line of work? Versus your traditional, like equity venture capital firm? How is that usually presented compared to things like stocks, bonds, REITs, things of that nature? That's something that's always really interested me because I got in during that time. I got in exactly at the peak of the prior cycle in 2017 at about $19,000. My first purchase was actually Litecoin around $300, and then come to know that Mr. Charlie Lee tweet saying sell all of his Litecoin due to conflict of interest, right? I'm sure many of you on here familiar with the crypto lore, as well as Vitalik, right? And that was kind of my rough introduction within the first month or two of me coming into this asset class. And back then, um, there really wasn't much institutional um, really acceptance for the digital asset space, except you know guys like Pantera, Galaxy Digital, right, and Andreessen Horowitz, things of that nature. But it wasn't really popular to offer clients any sort of Bitcoin or any minor exposure. But then, come this prior cycle, 2020, 2021, you have things like Mara, Hut 8, Marathon just going absolutely crazy. And anyone involved, really any risk on markets, wanted some sort of exposure to the digital asset space. So I wanted to know, how do you usually present that prospect to any client that's interested or sort of new to your fund?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I will tell you that back in 2018 and 2019, when I first started presenting the idea of Bitcoin to my clients, as far as part as part of being a part of our portfolios, they were super resistant to it. Like almost unanimously did not want to have anything to do with it. They saw the 2017 peak. They saw the crash after that. They heard everything in the paper about how it's evil and it's used by criminals, and how it's waste energy, and how blah blah blah, all these arguments. So basically wanted nothing to do with it. So I spent my first many months just teaching them in my letters, and then also kind of one-on-one calls with them, like, what is it, like, why is this important, why is this not just something that's like a flash in the pan, why is it still around? People kept calling it a tulip bubble, but it never quite dies, and it never went down to zero like everybody was predicting. So it started with education, and then one by one, I had a small minority of clients that were willing to let me put their accounts into some Bitcoin, which I did, and that was fantastic. And I love telling this story because I don't know if you guys aren't probably old enough, but I'm 48. So back in the day, there used to be these commercials that were these anti-drug commercials. They'd show a frying pan and they say, "This is your brain," and then they'd crack an egg into the frying pan and it would start to sizzle, and they'd say, "This is your brain on drugs," and the take-home message is, "Don't do drugs." And I would use that sort of analogy to say, like, look, here's your portfolio, a Vailshire portfolio. By the way, I have to add this disclaimer: none of this has anything to do with Vailshire. This is not individual investment or trading advice. Thank you. Okay, so what I would do is I'd have my Vailshire portfolios. I'd put some of them with a small amount of Bitcoin, usually like be somewhere between 2 and 5%. And the other ones, I would just have the exact same portfolio, but with no Bitcoin. And then throughout 2019 and into 2020, which you guys remember, that wasn't just incredible for Bitcoin, but by the end of 2020, it was starting to perk up. So then I would have just compare and contrast easy portfolios for my clients. I'm like, look, here's yours. You're skeptical about Bitcoin, but look at the returns of these portfolios, which all I had was a little 5% allocation to Bitcoin in them. They're not more volatile, right? Because they were, at the time, it was uncorrelated with the other risk assets, but we had just massively better performance. And so I could start to show them, and then one by one, right? Money talks, profits talk. If you start seeing number go up, and you start seeing, like, man, my portfolio would have done X, percent better had I just had a small percentage of Bitcoin in it. It seems like kind of a no-brainer. So that made it easy. When Bitcoin's in a bull market, it makes it extremely easy to sell it to people. It's much harder during a bear market, obviously. So that's how I do it for my clients. I still talk about it on a regular basis, obviously here on Twitter, but in my client newsletters, I just talk about it now. And most of my clients, even though most of them, I would say, still don't understand it, they know that I understand it, and they trust me with those decisions. And I try to really keep it simple for people and just say, you know what, Bitcoin is just simply better money. That's all it is. Think about fiat currency, like what frustrates you about fiat, right? These high prices that we're seeing at the grocery store, those kind of things, that price inflation, that comes from long-standing monetary debasement. And sorry. Oh, so that's how I teach them, and I just talk about how Bitcoin is basically the antithesis, the opposite of fiat currency in every way. I'm like, isn't it weird that it's just that our monetary policy decisions are decided by a few random people in a room? They're obviously smart, but like, why do they have the right to just control our money and have this much power over our lives? Wouldn't it be awesome if there was a money that was just decentralized and wasn't really controlled by any rulers, but just had a set of rules, and we always knew how much Bitcoin there was going to be. We always knew there would never be more than 21 million. Things like that. And I'll start talking to them about that, and then talking about how life just gets more and more expensive. Like, all of our lives, right? Everything has gotten more expensive. I said earlier, I'm 48. I still remember as a kid when Snickers bars cost 25 cents, big Snickers bars in a vending machine. Now you go to a vending machine and a Snickers bar is like $1.50 or $2 and it's probably smaller in size. And so everybody understands inflation, and everybody knows that prices just go up and up and up year after year after year. And so that's why I'll be like, wouldn't it be amazing to have a money where, instead of prices going up and up year after year, prices actually got lower year after year? Can you imagine that? What if prices just stayed stable? What if healthcare costs just stayed stable? I'm a former doctor. Like, imagine if every year, if you had some kind of medical condition, or had to have a surgery, or had to get an MRI. Imagine if that didn't, like, bankrupt you because it costs so much. What if those prices were stable or actually decreased year after year if the technology kept improving? So anyways, those are the kind of things I talk to people about. It depends where they're at. It depends where they're coming from. Are they from finance? Are they just regular people who don't really understand finance? Everybody understands costs of groceries going higher, so that's an easy starting point for me. That was a really long-winded answer, but hopefully it makes sense.
I do, man, and I definitely agree with you when it pertains, to these grocery prices. I actually went to Whole Foods, and I'm a fan of eggs and bacon, and when I saw the eggs and the bacon, I saw that massive price gauge, and I'm pretty sure they're up over 100%. And the first thing that comes into mind is, whoa, what is going on with the eggs and the bacon, right? So, if any individual did not have any exposure to any equities or any risk on assets over the last few years, then I mean, you've just taken a massive, and I mean massive hit via inflation. So I guess we can move on from sort of the introduction, Dr. Ross, and really go into the nitty gritty of what's going on currently in the markets. I'm personally of the belief that we will be seeing 2 to 3% CPR marks second half of 2023, and there are many, many, many forward-looking data points that we can look at to say that we can hit more or less close to those numbers, especially when you look at things like commodities and also things pertaining to the supply chain bottlenecks and things of that nature. Um, so, Dr. Ross, man, I mean, we had a yearly open, right, in the cryptocurrency asset class, where Bitcoin opens up 80% off its all-time high. The rest of all the cryptos are down 90, 95%. We just had our first close to negative month over month performance regarding things like CPI and potentially even PPI, right? So we see that this asset class responds quite well, and Bitcoin puts in a 30% weekly candle. I mean, I haven't seen that since 2021. So I mean, the risk to reward, moving on towards the later parts of 2023, there's a case to be made that, who's not to say that we can finish off the year at 28, 30, $32,000 per unit on Bitcoin. What are some metrics that you're looking at, Dr. Ross, when it pertains to the digital asset class that has you feeling bullish? I know you've been across these spaces more active, speaking your part, but I really like to have you share that with our community, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Great question, and it's good, and I think it's relevant coming from someone like me, only because I've been so bearish for so long, right? I mean, I've literally been mostly bearish since last January of 2022, with little spurts of bullishness that then quickly faded. So here's how I am right now. What the things that I watch closely, because these things, at least in my opinion, move asset classes. They move markets. So I look at what is the dollar doing. I look at what is volatility doing. I look at what are interest rates doing. I look at what is the monetary base in general doing. And a great term, kind of a non-specific term for that, is liquidity. What's liquidity doing? And then how are asset classes responding to that? So literally all the way up until the middle of last week. Uh, Let me back up. By the end of December, I was massively bearish, and I was very public about that. I was short everything, short stocks, both U.S. and international. I was short bonds as well. Basically, anything I could short, I did. But then there was a change of character that happened right away in January, and so I was watching that and watching the stock start to move. So my system moved me, my shorter term trading system moved me into a bullish mode. I thought this was just another typical bear market rally. So middle of last week, I was doing what I had done for a lot of 2022, and I started putting on shorts again. But then as I spent time watching things and studying kind of what the markets were doing, I'm actually convinced now that a regime change has actually occurred and that things are different now. And I'm actually bullish now, almost across the board. Why am I bullish? The dollar has broken down. That's kind of the number one thing. I was waiting for the dollar to rebound. I didn't really believe that it was going to continue to stay down, but it basically broke below its 200-day moving average all the way back on December 1st. And it's continued to sort of, kind of fade lower from there. It dropped down to, on the first 104, it's currently sitting at 102.39. VIX is the second thing. VIX, whenever VIX, and this is what I use, if VIX is below 20, I like it to be below 19. 19 to 20 is sort of a gray zone for me. But if it's below 20 in general, that means risk on. That means you should go long risk assets, at least in my book. If it's above 20, between like 20 and 30, then you get kind of a real choppy sideways. Price action is great for traders, but not good for long-term holders. And then above that, above 30, it's just kind of off the board. Any kind of long-term investing, you got to just think about shorts and short-term trading. Anyways, so VIX is low. VIX is right now currently it's sitting at 1922. I've been waiting for the VIX to rebound in throughout all of 2022. Whenever the VIX went sub 20, went down to kind of the 19 to 20 range, that was a perfect peak to add shorts. That was a rip that you should have shorted. Again, I think the regime changes happen. I had put shorts on just like I did all throughout 2022, and they all started going against me. And it just doesn't feel right when that starts happening. It's like something. It's telling me something. Market prices are telling you something when what worked in the past isn't working now. So you have to take a step back. You have to remain humble and consider where you could be wrong. So that's where I think there's a second regime change. So the dollar, I look at VIX, and then I look at just across the board asset classes that have reclaimed their 200-day moving average. 200 days moving average, as you all know. Lots of institutions use that. It doesn't really mean anything, right? It's just a meaningless designation, but tons of institutional investors use that as a designation for if it's above the 200-day moving average, it's bullish. If it's below, it's bearish. It's honestly that simple for some people. They use it as trailing stops. I use that sometimes across my funds as well. So what did I start to notice? I noticed that everything was starting to perk above its 200-day moving average. So the Dow Jones Industrial, that's been the strongest throughout all this. And we should get back to that at some point, by the way. We should compare today to the dot-com bubble and bust, because I think we're in a very similar situation. So the Dow Jones outperformed the NASDAQ markedly during that time period through 2003 and then even beyond. Value stocks outperformed growth in that time period, and I think we're in a similar set again. But fast forwarding to, again, where we are today, all of these things are above their 200-day moving average. From the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500 just reclaimed it. Small cap stocks have reclaimed it. Mid cap stocks have reclaimed it. Looking overseas, Chinese stocks, emerging markets, European stocks, all above their 200-day moving average. All of that's bullish. And then obviously you guys are because Bitcoin reclaimed its 200-day moving average recently, just on Friday, actually. That's highly bullish. So when you look at all of those different asset classes, all of the risk assets are performing as they should when the dollar is declining, and when VIX is low. Risk assets should perform well, and they are performing well. So to me, again, this is just kind of data dependent. I'm not bullish because I want to be bullish or because I'm tired of being bearish. I'm bullish because risk assets are now performing bullishly. They're responding bullishly to these other factors that are going on. And I think until it changes, I'm gonna go with that flow. So I've converted from basically fully bearish to fully bullish throughout my fund. And then one last thing, and I know I'm talking a lot here, but the one last thing is the laggard is the NASDAQ stocks. I think NASDAQ stocks could perform well. Tech, innovation, those kind of growth stocks, they got beaten down so horribly. I mean, even worse than Bitcoin in many cases, right? Like Shopify and other kind of smaller tech stocks just got decimated in this bear market, down 85, 90, 95%. Some of those will rebound quite sharply and do really, really well. But I think in general, for the 2020s, for this decade, I would not look to tech stocks. I would not look to the big tech, the FANG stocks, to carry the market like they did last decade. I think that decade is over for sure. I would look for value to outperform growth. I would look for small caps to outperform large caps. And I would look at emerging markets again. They've kind of been left for dead, but I think emerging markets should do pretty well for this decade.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on emerging markets, particularly the India sector. I know there's some innovation going on over there, and I know you mentioned the euro markets. One statistic that I looked at was the consumer confidence indicator, and I mentioned this a few spaces ago, but it's actually at an all-time low relative to when that started being tracked in 1985. And typically, whenever you have a lower low on a chart like that, it typically indicates at the very least a local bottom for a long time. And speaking of value, there are a few single names in that class of equities that I've been paying attention to, particularly things like John Deere or Caterpillar. We have we have a value stock that has hit an all time high for the first time in maybe a year. And even in tech, we have things like Apple that just does not want to break that support at 120, 125. And when I'm looking at crypto, I kind of think of it as, an early stage NASDAQ, maybe in the mid 80s, early 90s at best. And there's a case to be made that perhaps a lot of that value that would have gone into the NASDAQ um, might trickle down to this asset class. And for myself, one thing that I look at is this DeFi platform called Aave. And anytime there's an uptick in things like total value locked, um, people posting their collateral to borrow against them, um, typically to me, it signifies that there are more people taking risks, and also there's a lot of more inflows to exchanges than outflows. And I think there's many events that we can attribute to that were sort of these black swan events, particularly FTX. And before that, you had things like Celsius, BlockFi. Um, what's that other one? I know there's one exchange. It escapes my mind right now. Yes, Nexo. Sorry, Nexo. You have a lot of this froth just get eliminated, and hindsight, you can say that 2022 was awful, but really, this time last year, many people would have said, "Oh, FTX is a bank account," right? That's how it was. That was how it was shared among consensus, right? Even these politicians that tried running for House last year, that are up on these macro Twitter spaces, vouched for him. You know, and it seems like we don't really have a boogeyman over our heads anymore. So when you navigate this sector, Dr. Ross, are these things that signify to you that, all right, now that all this froth has been drained and confidence has been destroyed, do you look at things like sentiment when it pertains to adding to your portfolio in Velshire, or is it more like technicals and macroeconomic factors, like letting data dictate, right? So things like CPI, earnings, things of that nature.
Yeah, so lots of things to talk about there. So first of all, consumer sentiment is a great thing to look at, right? Because people always get the most bearish at exactly the wrong time, or basically exactly the bottom. And historically, that's been proven over and over again to be a great time to invest, is when people are kind of peak bearishness, and that's what we've been seeing over the last couple of months for sure. So that's just one indicator to look at. I still wait for price action personally when I invest for my clients. I don't try to pick bottoms. I try to confirm bottoms. So I wait for prices to rebound enough to where they reclaim, strong averages like the 200-day moving average, like we discussed before. That's why I've gotten suddenly so bullish, is because things are suddenly they're starting to be confirmed basically across the board. Now I'm in a crypto room, and so this is probably not going to be awesome. But here's a couple of thoughts that I have on some other things you said. First is that lots of people that I kind of hang with, and I don't want to say they're prophetic or anything, but they did see, just looking kind of at the facts, that lots of these exchanges were going to go down in flames. Basically, if you're offering interest across the space, you always got to ask, where does that interest come from? And for anybody who did any kind of deeper research into these products, these centralized finance interest rate exchange products, you realize that this interest is coming from kind of sketchy platforms, from other funds that were taking very high risks. And so a lot of people, at least kind of in my clubs, were sort of warning about this kind of months in advance before they happen. So I would just be very, very cautious still to this day, even if we're in a new kind of bullish market. I would still steer clear of almost every interest product that you see, because it's if you don't know where the interest come from, then you're probably going to become a victim of that exchange. So just be very careful. And that, by the way, that does extend into DeFi. I think people think that, well, this was all CeFi related. I think things can also happen across DeFi as well. We saw with the whole Terra Luna debacle that basically if there's underlying support that people take for granted, that suddenly people start to question they start to question what actually is supporting this. Like, is there a solid base underneath this? And if it's just some random token and people lose confidence that token, it literally can happen within 24 to 48 hours where you get wiped out completely. So just be super, super careful if you guys want to speculate in this. The other thing that doesn't make me very popular is that I'm not convinced there's going to be another huge crypto bull run. So in the past, crypto has always ridden the coattails of Bitcoin, right? When Bitcoin goes up, that kind of revs up crypto. We're seeing that again right now. And some of these cryptos can outperform Bitcoin 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1 sometimes, right? And so people have made crazy amounts of money really fast. This time around, I'm not so sure. I've been around, like I said, since about 2015. I think regulation is coming. And if regulation is truly coming, that's going to make it really hard for a lot of these crypto projects to succeed and to even exist. If Gary Gensler and the SEC come down across the board on all US and US related exchanges, it's going to be really hard, first of all, just to simply buy and sell Bitcoin. So that's one thing to be careful about. Two, if they actually figure out a way to go after individual cryptos, which is going to be very hard for them, right? Since there's 20,000 plus cryptos out there, can they really go out against all of those? Probably not. They just don't have the manpower for that. But I'm just not convinced that there is going to be a massive rally. And then thirdly, kind of getting back to what we talked about before, I think because we've had this huge regime change similar to what happened after the dot-com bust, I'm not convinced that these highly speculative instruments are going to just soar to the moon like they did last decade. I just think it's a decade where value outperforms growth. And I think that means basically like Bitcoin outperforms crypto. I think hard assets outperform non-hard assets. And I think that's just going to hold true. So I would just say be very careful. I would never, ever, ever buy and hold any crypto other than just Bitcoin but if you want to trade them and speculate in them, go for it. It's a free country. I don't care what you do. But I would strongly recommend saving in Bitcoin and taking profits regularly if that's something you're into.
Thanks, Dr. Jeff. And since you got into the space in 2015, what are some of the advancements that the space has made that are quite quite noteworthy? I don't really think Bitcoin is just this, means of exchange for quote unquote money laundering and things of that nature. As we see some of these third world countries, they denominate their wealth in Bitcoin. It's actually saved a number of lives, even especially with countries like Venezuela, Chile, El Salvador, things of that nature. What are some of the things that you've noticed since you got into the industry, and what are some developments that you've been paying attention to that you can share with us?
Yeah, 100%. I think you bring up great points. Like, so why am I focusing so much time on Bitcoin? Like I literally just spend time every day talking to people about it and trying to teach people about it. And it's for one of the reasons, it's because of what you just said. People who live in countries that, like, they're generally developing nations that have kind of dictatorships or really sketchy governments that do really sketchy things and have a history of doing that repeatedly. They see their life savings, their purchasing power get wiped out like over and over and over again. There's older people in Argentina and Venezuela and Lebanon and pick a country that we heard about in the news, Turkey, where they have their life savings where they've worked so hard for it, and then basically the government debases it and hyperinflation occurs, and they just lose everything. Everything they've ever worked for just goes away, and it's because of just mismanagement from a government perspective of the monetary system. They get Bitcoin like right away. If you talk about them and you say, here's a decentralized system that's not controlled by any governing officials, it's totally decentralized, it's totally secure, nobody can take it from you. It basically gives you property rights and access to money regardless of what the government wants to do. When you tell them that and you tell them there's only 21 million Bitcoin that are ever going to be in existence, they get that right away. They're like, oh, dang, I transfer my purchasing power right now into that. If I can put my local government fiat currency into Bitcoin, I will do it right now, or at least do some of it. So they just get it. We see here over in America, most of these rooms where we're talking about Bitcoin, they're people talking about trading Bitcoin. They're people who are talking about trying to profit from Bitcoin. They're not talking about preserving their purchasing power like these people who are desperate in other countries. So that's what I like to do, is kind of shift the focus to, it's just better money. It's just money. It's like social justice in monetary form. What I love about Bitcoin, it's literally just a parallel monetary and financial system. It's literally running in parallel to the current dollar denominated world's monetary and financial system. And so it's going to clash. Governments are not going to like it. The US government, especially, at some point, they're going to continue to kind of come against it. They're going to try to get their kind of talons into it so that they can see what's going on. They want to know, is there criminal activity? They want to be able to turn off the faucet if they can. Like if they don't like something that Russia is doing and Russia's doing something with Bitcoin, they want to be able to get in there and intervene in there and shut that pipeway off. They may not be able to, and that's going to be frustrating for them, right? They don't like it that it's so decentralized and that it can kind of stand alone outside of their jurisdiction and outside of their purview. So there are many battles. It's going to be a tumultuous decade as Bitcoin continues to grow. What have I seen across Bitcoin? I've been waiting kind of impatiently. Everybody gets into Bitcoin because of the price action, and then usually they see the shiny objects over in crypto, and they get sucked into being a degen trader like I used to be. But what's happening on Bitcoin, it's happening slowly, but it's very methodical and it's very important what's happening. And I think, people talk about Bitcoin being old tech. It's just basically perfect, simple technology. And that's the base layer technology. That's what makes it so beautiful. So I've been patiently waiting over the last few years for these layer 2 solutions, right? The Lightning Network that everybody hears about. I want to see the Bitcoin symbol when I go to you talked about going to Whole Foods. I want to see when I go to Whole Foods and I'm going to pay for my groceries or whatever, wherever I go, to go get some food for my family. When I see the options to pay with Visa or MasterCard or Discover, or whatever, I want to see the Bitcoin symbol right next to that so that I can easily pay with the Lightning Network. I think that is coming soon. In fact, I think it's coming in 2023, where most Americans will see that and have that option. And I think that as more and more people around the world see that, for all these people who have no idea what Bitcoin is, all they hear is, the occasional blurb on it from the newspapers or what the newscasters say, most of which is negative, by the way. I think when they start seeing the Bitcoin symbol and the ability to pay with the Lightning Network easily and just as easily as with their credit card for their groceries, for their gas, for meals, for whatever, that's just going to, in their mind, validate it. They're going to like, oh, okay, this is just a legitimate money. Yeah, and I think that's instantly going to increase adoption and increase the comfortability that people have with Bitcoin. They're going to be okay with it and okay with using it, just like they're okay with using their credit cards. So this is the year 2023. I think there's been a lot of intense building in the background by guys like Jack Mallers from Strike, Jack Dorsey, over at Block, and other tons of other people that are doing awesome work on the Lightning Network on that layer, which, by the way, technically speaking, is way beyond my intelligence. I have no idea how they do any of that. But I just am waiting for them to come out with easy solutions for when I pay for groceries. It's just as easy to pay with Bitcoin as it is with US dollars. And when we reach that point, that's going to be, I think, a game changer for Bitcoin. The other thing I'm waiting for patiently, and I don't know when this is going to happen, and I haven't seen any signs that this is going to happen anytime soon, is for Bitcoin to get treated not as property by the IRS, but just to be treated like other currency that when you make purchases. So if we want to spend our Bitcoin on a coffee or on, whatever, the eggs at Whole Foods, you're not causing a taxable transaction. It's just a regular transaction. So I'm waiting for that to happen too, but we're nowhere near that yet. I think when we get to that point as well, then the use case for Bitcoin will just dramatically increase, and adoption will dramatically increase as well.
All right, perfect.
I had a
Gentlemen,
question for I had a question for Dr. Jeff real quick.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, so do you think that transactional adoption of Bitcoin is necessary for its success? So do you think that we necessarily need to see Whole Foods allowing us to buy our groceries with Bitcoin for it to succeed? Or do you think, because I mean, just to compare it to gold real quick, I mean, we don't transact with gold. We kind of like, I mean, a lot of gold bugs just hold it as like a store of value and they see it as money too, but they don't necessarily see it as something that you like transact every day with. And so I was just curious as to what you're looking for as far as like if that's something that you want to see for its ultimate success, or if that's just something that would be nice if you thought would happen.
Yeah, great question. Feel pain. Love the name. So first of all, I think it's coming absolutely, and I think we're going to see that in the next year or two, where the use case for these medium of exchange transactions occur across the board, and yes, I think that will significantly increase adoption. I don't think it's necessary for Bitcoin. I think if it didn't happen, Bitcoin could exist easily as a reserve asset, similar to how gold is thought of, and especially how U.S. Treasuries are thought of. I think it would still inevitably increase throughout the years as a reserve asset. But I think if we want to start seeing it more as this medium of exchange and as this, money basically, we need to see these layer 2 and layer 3 solutions really come across. And I think that as they come across, this will rapidly increase adoption. So I think it will speed adoption the more quickly we get these layer 2 solutions in place.
Cool, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, we're just a bit over the halfway mark. Again, if you're new here on the Twitter Spaces, my name is King Wabi, and I'm presenting to you Crypto World Radio on behalf of Because Bitcoin here on Twitter Spaces. And our special guest for today is Dr. Jeff Ross, who is the founder of Velshire Capital. And, we're talking all things Bitcoin, digital assets, however you want to name it. And we're getting to know Jeff on a more in depth level, and also learning how he navigates markets and how he sees the market for this year. Gentlemen, if any of you here in the audience want to come up and give some of your thoughts, ask some questions, feel free to go ahead and click that request button. I'll bring you right up. Uh, So we have Crypto Jack. What's going on, brother? Good friend of the show. Good to see you here, man. How you doing?
Yeah, thank you, Wabi. I'm good, man. And hello, Because Bitcoin team and Dr. Jeff. I'm a big fan of yours, so I see your name, and that's where I find myself. Thanks for being here. I had a quick question for you too. I liked all the things you had to say. I've found, and it reflects in my life as well. I wanted to hear your thoughts on one side of it that I didn't really hear you mention. I did have issues early on, so maybe you covered it early, but I know in my personal life, I've been able to orange pill more people than ever before, right on the heels of the Canadian truckers stuff. And just kind of like more broadly, it seems in the first world countries, there's been more of this push to be on, quote, the right side of politics or the right side of history. And there's even been, like in the event with the Canadian truckers, if you were found to have donated to them in one way or another, your accounts at your local bank and or those of your business could be shut down. It was a whole to do. It was a big deal. And so when I was talking to people, who are use the dollars primarily, who they don't really resonate with some of the other reasons to get into Bitcoin that you went over, like someone from Venezuela might. Anyway, that specifically seemed to get their attention. So, what have you seen on that side of it, or have you seen anything like that that's gotten people's attention who otherwise wouldn't have been interested?
Yeah, well, first of all, Crypto Jack, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. So what you're hitting on, right, is one of the awesome features of Bitcoin. It's permissionless, right? And so that is absolutely another angle to take with people when people are facing a situation where the government steps in and says, yeah, I know you want to make that transaction. I know you want to send money from here to there. And we say, no, sorry. And in fact, since you've been doing that in the past, we're going to actually clamp down and shut down your bank account. And, we do that on a national scale, right? We did that. The U.S. did that to Russia, and that raised a lot of eyebrows and really, I think, changed dynamics around the world when they did that, when they cut Russia off from their assets. And then in China, in Canada, to your point, that when this whole truckers thing happened, like, who would have thought Canada would have done that? Like, I certainly wouldn't have. I consider Canada to be basically, America to the north. And so it was pretty astonishing to see that they did that. But that's how seriously government takes that. If they don't like where you're putting your money, they take away your permission to move your money. They take away your permission to have your own money. And so you can tell me if you think that's fair or not. I would say no, and I would have a serious issue with that. I don't like that. I get it. You're right. They always kind of couch it in, well, we want to stop terrorists from doing stuff. But what if they label, the other side, the other political party, as terrorists? What if they label people that don't do what they say as terrorists? Is that the kind of country we want to live in? Is this the kind of world we want to live in? I would say most people would say no. So totally with you there, right? The permissionless nature of Bitcoin is another fantastic feature of it. It can't be stopped, right? But you got to be careful, because some people did donate in Bitcoin, and they did it to these sort of repositories that then got kind of hijacked by the government and shut down in reverse. And that's another thing. It's not completely private, right? The government can still find you. If you're a bad guy and you want to do bad things, don't use Bitcoin. That's like the stupidest thing ever, because they can still track you down and figure out where you came from. There are private forms of cryptocurrency if you want to do that. I don't recommend that. Obviously, I think it's pretty dumb. Be honest, be above the belt and above the board. But anyway, so yeah, that's a long-winded answer to say the permissionless nature of Bitcoin is awesome. It's just one of the many incredible features of Bitcoin, and that's it's also what makes it frustrating for government officials as well. By the way, I only have like 2 or 3 minutes left, and then I got to bust out for my next interview, and I'm really sorry. But I just want to let you know, King Wabi.
No problem, man. I saw your message. It's all good. Gentlemen, I encourage all of you here in the audience. We have over 350 people listening. I encourage you all to follow us here on Twitter at Because Bitcoin. We're always working around the clock to give you content from the morning all the way to the evening times. Feel free to share anything that you find pretty useful from all the content we put out. We do have a full-time writer sharing articles and all that stuff, and also myself and Carter with these Twitter Spaces. Dr. Jeff, I want to thank you for your time, and I guess we'll end off with the most important question, and a question that we all ask ourselves. Dr. Jeff, how do we onboard the next few million users to the digital asset space? What can we do to advance the space forward, and also have a bit of an easier onboarding process to the individuals outside of the digital asset sector?
Yeah, great question. Fun to end with. Well, first of all, like coming full circle, obviously when I'm onboarding people now, I'm just trying to onboard them to Bitcoin, because to me that's the easiest thing to do. It's just better money for the better world. I think if you want to onboard people onto crypto, you got to talk about the speculative nature and the chances to make lots of money. But I would never recommend that you buy and hold anything in crypto land, personally, and that's just from personal experience. Bitcoin, though, right? We get back to talking about all the reasons it's permissionless. It doesn't debase like other monetary the way other government fiats do. It's totally decentralized. It's not controlled by anybody. You got to kind of figure out where people are coming from, and so the short answer to your question is it really comes down to education. It comes down to like knowing who you're talking to understanding Bitcoin well enough to be able to talk about the different attributes of it, to talk about why it's different, to talk about why it's not evil. In fact, if any money were to be considered immoral, it would be government fiat, right? And you could go off on tons of reasons. I like to just basically talk about here's what government fiat is. Here's what Bitcoin is. Here's how they're literally like polar opposites of each other from basically every angle you look at it. And then the one angle that they do share right now, government fiat is much better as a medium of exchange, and it probably will be for quite some time. But I like to talk about the promising features that are coming in Bitcoin on layer 2, right? The Lightning Network, and how, be on the lookout. I tell people, be on the lookout when you're shopping for the little Bitcoin symbol. You'll start to be able to pay for people, or pay for your groceries, pay for your goods and services with Bitcoin. And to me, that's a game changer, and that's the game changer moment that I think is coming in the next year or two. And hey, King Wabi, thanks so much for having me on. And I'm sorry I got to run, but it's been really fun to be up here today. There's a lot of people in the audience that I see, friends of mine that know a lot more about Bitcoin than I do. So, pull any one of them up and you'll have a great conversation. But thanks for having me.
No problem, man. God bless you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come talk shop with us, man. It was good to formally introduce you to more of a crypto specific side of the brand. So I'm sure we'll run into each other, man. And I'm right there with you. I'm more cautiously bullish than I am bearish, to be honest, over the last month or two. So thank you, man. Take care. Thank you so much. And guys, again, if you're here in the audience, I encourage you to follow us here at Because Bitcoin here on Twitter, so that you can, partake in these Twitter Spaces with quality guests like Dr. Jeff Ross. And I see Big Joe Carlos there. What's going on, Mr. Carlos, sir? Good to see you here, brother. It's always a fun time to hear you speak, man. If anyone wants to come and just talk some general shop for the next 5 to 10 minutes, feel free to do so. We usually run these spaces for about an hour. Now that Dr. Jeff had to go and do his thing, I figured I'd spend about 5, maybe 10 minutes tops to just talk some shop. So if you want to come up and talk all things Bitcoin and digital assets, feel free to click that request button. I'll bring you right on up. And yeah, always love connecting with you guys. It's always a fun time. Thank you guys so much for the support that you've shown us here at Because Bitcoin, especially here at Crypto World Radio. Since I started this for you guys a little over a month ago, we have some very exciting things for you guys, especially in the later quarter of Q1, late February, early March. We'll have some nice things for you guys when it pertains to these more crypto specific Twitter spaces here because Bitcoin. I see we have 2 speaker requests. I'll bring you guys up. What's going on, Jack? How you doing, brother?
Hey, I'm good. I was just going to say, I agree with Dr. Jeff with respect to how the technicals line up, and they look very bullish for Bitcoin right here. I have a pinned tweet where I've been following particular chart structures that get exciting, and without boring everyone, it's the first time in several years that things have been as exciting as they are now. There's like a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But one thing I wish Dr. Jeff had touched on, and maybe you can have him back on and ask him this directly. How do you kind of match up and marry these ideas of, okay, Bitcoin looks good ish, better than it has for sure. How do we marry the way that the retail markets look, the fact that interest rates continue to rise, that really it's not like we're out of the woods yet with respect to a potential recession, that kind of thing. And that is something that I really haven't come to grips with, and I'd love to hear his thoughts or anybody else's for that matter. But just wanted to bring that up.
I'll take that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Before we go on to the other speakers, I do want to make some rules and clarify a few things. Number one, we like to keep a tight ship around here. Please, no cursing, no speaking over one another, and please be respectful of all speakers and the listeners, especially the brand, at all times. So we'll go with you. Wilhelm. What's going on, brother? Go ahead.
What's up, King? All right, so in my very uneducated opinion of the question that was just asked, everyone likes to treat Bitcoin like it's an asset. They like to treat it like it's a financial product. They like to treat it like it's a speculative endeavor. Okay, that's all well and good. It may be those things, but I believe what we're coming up to now is an utter decoupling of pricing Bitcoin as a risk asset, pricing it as a financial product, pricing it in any way like that. I believe we're moving into that it actually is a service. It is a good. It provides a very needed service. And so, people who get caught up too much with the technical analysis, I think, are missing the forest for the trees. Like, don't get me wrong, that can be a good trade indicator of where to get in, get out. But, from my perspective, if you're trading Bitcoin, you're doing it wrong. There's other shit to trade. So I think we're readily, very quickly entering the phase where it totally decouples from every other asset class, and we start to see it inhabit its use case, which is sound money globally, right? And so what is the addressable market there, right? Who needs sound money on planet Earth? Pretty sure about 8 billion people need sound money. So to use that sound money, to effectively use the Bitcoin blockchain, you have to own Bitcoin, right? So therefore, the demand is going to absolutely skyrocket, not because people are looking to benefit from the speculative nature of it. No, they're going to use it because they're slowly or quickly, whichever way you want to put it, realizing that those that are in control of the money are absolute vampires and could care less if everyone died except them. So I think we're approaching very quickly a paradigm shift of how it's perceived and therefore priced. So that's my take.
Thank you very much. We now have Mr. Brad Mills. What's up? What's going on?
Hey, how's it going? Curious to hear a little bit about your story, and because Bitcoin, I've heard you guys on the other night. Bitcoin Tina came up and he was singing some praises. I hadn't heard of you guys before. What's the story with because Bitcoin? How'd you guys get into this space, and what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, no problem, man. Well, here because Bitcoin, it's usually like the main star of the brand is called Carter, and him and the CEO Max typically talk about more of the macroeconomic side of things in the equity markets. I predominantly do not trade the U.S. equity markets. I'm exclusive to cryptocurrency, digital assets, whatever term you want to label it. But I've known Carter for a year now, and I've known Max since the summertime. And so they do that side of content, and I stick more towards the crypto aspect type of things. But yeah, if you want to know a little bit about us, we usually run content Monday through Friday, YouTube, and also here on Twitter via Twitter Spaces. If you want to check us out, we're actually going to have our main show, which is called Market Talk, later on today at 4:15 p.m. Eastern time. And feel free to go on there and introduce yourself and talk to the guys. Usually with Crypto World Radio and Market Talk, we like to keep it to strictly. We like to keep it strictly to an hour as much as possible to be respectful of not only audience's time but our producers' time that work pretty much around the clock. But as I was saying, 11 a.m. Eastern time, we have our YouTube live stream called Market Check, where we just brief our audience on news events pertaining to the equities markets, crypto markets, and also some general analysis stuff. And then we have crypto, my bad, we have Market Talk here via Twitter Spaces at 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time. And then myself with Crypto World Radio at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. However, when I do have these special guests, sometime it's a bit earlier in the day, or a bit later, but typically it's at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and it could be anybody from within the digital asset space. Like I've had Joe on before. Today we have Jeff. So I know Joe's a litigator, and Jeff is the founder of a venture fund. I've also had Magoo on, who's more prominent in the Bitcoin community. I've also had guys that work at these more broader VC funds like NGC Ventures. Also, we've had the founder of Momentum 6 here on Crypto World Radio, and also some prominent figures in the trading community, such as Trader XO, and people like him as well, like Crypto Shadow, founder of Tier 7 Network. So I like to have as many of diverse guests as possible, and just talk shop. We get to know, how they came into the space, what they've liked throughout their years in the market, how they see the market moving forward. We talk all things past and current things in the digital asset space. So it's really a welcoming community, to be honest. We talk all
Well,
sorts.
if you want, I could tag on to something Jeff was saying, Dr. Ross was saying earlier that I agreed with him on, and I pinned something up to the top there. I related to the cycles that he was talking about, how he got into the 2019 or the 2017 cycle, ended up trading himself out of his Bitcoin. Many people did that the last cycle, and many are repeating the same mistakes this cycle, and it's almost uncanny how similar the cycles are playing out. And everybody thought this time is different, and it's almost like a direct time mirror as well, because when Dr. Ross was saying that, by 2018, end of 2018, a lot of crypto traders were down like 95% against their Bitcoin. You see a lot of that this cycle too, and the cycle of fear and greed, and also the cycle of like accepting that it's a bear market. It's playing out very similarly.
Yeah, I actually agree with Brad quite a bit on that. It's uncanny as well with respect to price action, and this is some of the stuff I go over on my content, but we ended 2018 way down. We go into 2019 and just rubber band moonshot to the north, which was the year before the halving. Right now, 2023 is a year before the halving. We're starting to break up again. I mean, there's a lot of similarities at play.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I agree. There's usually many things that have some confluence, specifically the Litecoin having happened in 2015, 2019. There's always an echo bubble the year prior to the halving, and there's usually some sort of retest from the low. Um, I know we hit 15.4 the day that FTX rugged, and then towards Thanksgiving we hit 15.3. So perhaps that was our double bottom, but we usually also have a yearly open retest, so perhaps that comes later on in Q1 or Q2. So I'm generally in the same field as you guys when it pertains to where the market's headed for the next few quarters. So I want to thank everyone for coming on our Twitter Spaces again for an earlier episode of Crypto World Radio. Thank you guys so much for participating. If you want to catch a replay of the space, if you just came in or have been in and out, 5 to 10 minutes after the space is concluded, gentlemen, it will be uploaded onto our YouTube. Same name, Because Bitcoin. And feel free to go over there and subscribe to us, like, comment, all that jazz. We will be doing some market talk episodes over there on our YouTube once a week. So you might want to check that out and tune into those things. It's always pretty cool seeing Carter being animated. He's really known for 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 being pretty animated when he gets into his rants. Always love to see that that animal spirit, that gusto. We all love Carter here. And yeah, also give me 1 second. Up on the Nest, we have a link to our Discord. Feel free to join that. We have we have almost 1,200 members there. Actually, pretty wild to see that. And if you guys enjoy these Twitter Spaces, feel free to give us a follow here on Twitter and turn on bell notifications so you can be updated when we do go live with these spaces. Shout out to some of our Because Bitcoin Chads. I see Kimchi over here. I see Tempest. What's going on, Tempest? I see Nicholas as well. And whew, man, what a day. What a day. Pretty nice weather here in Miami. I think I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to go to the beach, gentlemen. Probably have a hamburger. A pretty big hamburger, too. So, anyways, I'm out. Thank you all so much. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you all on Market Talk in about an hour. And that's pretty much it. Peace out. God bless you and take care.
The trading current is just math. It's just math. It has a 95.45% hit rate when we deviate outside of CP2 and CN2. All you had to do is recognize that 95% of the time when we get over here, under this blue line, we get some sort of mean reversion. So let's just assume you long right here. 95 out of 100 times, when I buy this, I'm going to get some sort of bounce. It's just math. Look what would have happened as we move up. Look at the bounce that came after. And now look where we are. If you had just blindly followed the current, you take all emotions out of it, you say, I'm going to trust the statisticians. You would have bought Dow Jones somewhere down here under 30,000, depending on how you want to measure it from absolute top to bottom, 20% move. We also have multi-time frame alerts. You don't even have to be at your computer on TradingView. You can ping your phone. Now the current has some really awesome features, and I would urge you guys to join our Discord to get access to it. We give it away for free as a tool to the community. It's just math. There's really no need to overcomplicate things, not even in the slightest.